you know, if you want to build a house, you use a tape measure.
Right. Yeah, of course.
An inch is an inch.
Yeah.
A centimeter is a centimeter. And that holds true today, tomorrow, 10 years from now.
Yeah.
The standard of measurement is just, completely fixed.
Right. I mean, it has to be fixed, or the entire structural integrity of the project just completely collapses.
Exactly.
You cannot have the fundamental unit of measurement constantly shifting beneath the feet of the carpenters and engineers. They wouldn't even be able to frame a simple doorway.
But then you look at money.
Oh, yeah.
The actual tool we use to measure basically all human labor, all value, all economic exchange across the globe. And suddenly that rigid tape measure is like made of rubber.
Totally.
An inch of value today might stretch or shrink to half an inch next year. That's the bizarre reality of the money sitting in our wallets right now, and we've just somehow accepted that shifting scale as normal.
Yeah, we treat it like the weather or something, like something that just happens to us rather than a system we actively engineer and manage.
So today, we're taking a deep dive into the mind of the brilliant mathematician and game theorist John F. Nash Jr. to figure out how to fix that rubber tape measure.
Which is such a fascinating angle.
It really is. We are grounding this entire exploration in a lecture text he delivered titled Ideal Money and Asymptotically Ideal Money.
Right.
We're going to decode Nash's highly provocative critiques of modern central banking, dig into the actual game theory behind why money functions in the first place, and uncover his ultimate vision for how international competition might naturally forge what he calls ideal currencies.
Because Nash is bringing a completely different toolkit to this problem.
Yeah.
He's taking his profound understanding of mathematics, probability, and human behavior and applying it to a daily utility. It really forces you to examine assumptions you didn't even realize you had about your own savings.
Okay, let's unpack this, because we carry a massive amount of historical and, well, moral baggage when it comes to cash.
Oh, definitely.
And Nash starts by urging us to strip all that away. He points out that society becomes totally irrational about money. We fail to view it simply as a technology.
Right, he uses the analogy of a radio, doesn't he?
Yeah, exactly. A radio is just an instrument meant to transmit a signal efficiently.
Mm-hmm.
But money, we constantly associate it with sin, immorality, and greed.
And the historical context he brings up is so revealing there. He points to the New Testament narrative of driving the money changers from the temple.
Right.
The underlying impulse there is to put this mundane, potentially unclean utility of commerce at a physical distance from the sacred space.
Hmm.
And you see similar moral frameworks elsewhere, like the traditional Islamic concept that classes any lending of money at interest as strictly forbidden usury.
And Nash kind of cheekily wonders about the actual economic conditions back then. Like, he questions what sort of rapid inflation rates were typical for Byzantine money during the days of the Prophet Muhammad.
That's a great point.
Yeah, if the currency was constantly degrading in value, charging high interest might have felt aggressively predatory, cementing that moral disgust.
That moral framing is just deeply ingrained.
Right.
We equate money with avarice and a lack of charity, but Nash flips that entirely on its head.
How so?
Well, he reminds us that money is the exact mechanism that makes highly efficient, large-scale philanthropy possible.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, think about it. If a major charity needs to distribute disaster relief, they don't want a barter system of donated blankets and canned goods that are a logistical nightmare to transport.
Right, that would be chaotic.
Exactly. They need the cold, hard efficiency of cash to deploy resources instantly where the need is greatest.
Yeah, because it's a practical artifact. Nash has this great philosophical point that money exists purely because we don't live in Garden of Eden conditions.
Right.
Imagine if we lived in a paradise where every single thing we ever needed just, fell from the trees. We wouldn't need a medium of exchange.
You just eat the apples.
Exactly. But reality is about specialized labor. One person grows the wheat, another builds the tractors, someone else engineers the software. We desperately need a way to exchange the vastly differing fruits of our labor without having to trade a tractor directly for 1,000 loaves of bread.
What's fascinating here is how Nash connects this purely mechanical view of money back to his views on welfare economics.
Okay, tell me more about that.
Well, he fundamentally believes that if a state wants to improve economic welfare and help its citizens, it should do so through clearly understandable, highly transparent actions.
So I'm trying to picture Nash's ideal state here. Is he saying something like a structured unemployment benefits program is inherently better because we can literally see the math on paper?
Yes, precisely. A system like unemployment compensation operates in direct proportion to the need.
Right.
The rules are structural, the math is public, and the social welfare goal is out in the open for voters to debate. Nash fiercely contrasts this transparent approach with obscure, manipulative monetary policies.
I see.
When a government tries to secretly engineer social or economic outcomes by manipulating the currency supply behind closed doors, it removes the public's ability to understand the game they are playing.
It's like the radio analogy again.
Yeah.
Being angry at money for human greed is like smashing your radio because you don't like the song the station is broadcasting.
Exactly. The radio isn't evil.
Right, it's just transmitting the signal. But wait, if money is just a neutral adapter for human labor, why do some economies completely collapse while others thrive? I mean, the underlying math of the adapter hasn't changed, has it?
To answer that, Nash takes us directly into his home turf, which is game theory.
Oh, there we go.
Because to understand why the adapter sometimes fails, you have to look at the foundational concept of utility.
Right.
Mathematical utility has a rich history. Nash traces it back to an 1886 paper by G.B. Antonelli, though it really became the bedrock of modern economics when von Neumann and Morgenstern published their famous work on game theory in the 1940s.
And human utility for money isn't just a simple straight line, is it? Like Nash mentions, it's typically nonlinear due to uncertainty and probability.
All right.
The intensity of your desire for the next $100 drops depending on how many hundreds you already have in the bank and, how likely you actually are to receive it.
That's the human behavioral element.
Yeah.
But the structural magic of money in game theory reveals itself when we look at how cooperative games are classified. Game theorists divide the world into two basic environments.
Okay.
You have games with transferable utility, known as TU games, and games without transferable utility, known as NTU games.
Let's make this incredibly concrete for a second.
Sure.
Imagine you are holding a massive surplus of apples from your orchard. I have a massive surplus of oranges from my grove, but we both really just want to eat bananas.
Right, a classic mismatch.
Yeah. If all we have are apples and oranges, we are completely stuck in an NTU game, a non-transferable utility scenario. I can hand you my apples, but they do not transfer the utility you actually desire. The energy is blocked.
And that blockage is fatal to complex economies.
Yeah.
The utility cannot efficiently move between the players.
Enter the universal adapter.
Exactly.
I sell my apples for money. You sell your oranges for money. We both take that money to the market and buy bananas. Money is the technological lubrication that magically converts our frustrating NTU game into a highly efficient TU game transferable utility. The energy flows.
And game theorists absolutely love this conversion. It is so mathematically desirable to have transferable utility that analysts will often just assume a TU environment in their models to make the math work.
Just to simplify things.
Yeah. Now, Nash points out that a perfect TU environment might strictly only be realistic for, say, large international insurance companies.
All right, insurance companies.
Well, think about what an insurance company does. They deal with millions of random, completely non-transferable disasters. A warehouse fire here, a flooded basement there. But by using money, they convert all that random, unpredictable chaos into a smooth mathematical TU game of premium revenues and claim payouts. When you successfully transform an NTU game to a TU game, there is an average gain to all the players.
Okay, so money is this brilliant public utility. It transfers value effortlessly. But that brings me back to my paradox from earlier.
Which one?
Well, if a Thai baht or a Swiss franc both transfer utility perfectly well for a transaction happening at noon today, where does the system break down?
The breakdown happens on the long-term time axis.
Tell me more about how the time axis works here.
Think of inflation as rust building up inside the pipes of that public utility.
Oh, I like that visual.
Yeah, if a transaction happens instantly, the rest doesn't matter much. But money's actual quality degrades through rapid, unpredictable inflation over time. Imagine living in an economy where the currency in your pocket, worth 100 units today, might randomly be worth 50 units or maybe just 10 units a year from now.
Right, if you don't know the size of the tape measure a year from now, you completely refuse to build the house.
Yeah.
Nobody in their right mind would lend money or sign a long-term contract in that environment.
Exactly the point Nash makes. The quality of the money standard strictly dictates a society's ability to engage in long-term financing and credit. If the money is highly inflationary, the time axis collapses. The future becomes too expensive to calculate, so people stop trusting the utility entirely, and economic growth just freezes.
Which naturally leads us to look at the people managing the utility.
Mm.
If inflation is the rust in the pipes, who is running the water treatment plant?
Exactly.
Here's where it gets really interesting, and I want to set the stage carefully here, because we are stepping into Nash's highly provocative, explicitly stated critique of central bankers and what he categorizes as the Keynesian school of thought.
Right. This is his framework.
Exactly. We are not endorsing a political side here. We are impartially unpacking the philosophical framework exactly as Nash laid it out to understand his perspective.
And it is a razor-sharp critique. Nash defines his specific use of the term Keynesian by looking back at the massive currency devaluations of the British pound and the U.S. dollar in the early 1930s.
Okay.
He notes that John Maynard Keynes himself was a brilliant multidimensional thinker, but the modern label of Keynesian, in Nash's view, has morphed into a doctrine favoring a manipulative state establishment.
What does that mean in practice?
It describes central banks and treasuries that continuously prioritize short-term economic welfare fixes while totally disregarding the long-term reputational damage to the national currency.
Nash contrasts this modern doctrine with Gresham's law,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
Gresham's law is that ancient economic observation stating bad money drives out the good. Meaning, if a government circulates cheap, degraded coins alongside high-quality, pure silver coins, the public isn't stupid.
Right.
They will hoard all the good silver coins under their mattresses and rush to spend the bad, degraded coins in the market. The bad money floods the system and drives the good money into hiding.
That's the historical mechanism. But Nash argues that the Keynesian school has effectively sold the public a quasi-doctrine teaching that bad money is actually better than good money.
Because bad money, meaning currency that a central bank can endlessly print and inflate, is the ultimate political tool.
Exactly.
It allows governments to fund immediate popular projects without having to balance a ledger. Nash references that famous, somewhat cynical quote from Keynes, "In the long run, we will all be dead."
Yeah.
Nash interprets the modern application of this as, well, why worry about the long-term rust in the pipes when printing money can temporarily patch today's crisis?
And Nash takes this critique to a deeply controversial place by drawing a structural parallel between this Keynesian approach and Bolshevik communists.
Now, to be clear, he isn't calling central bankers literal communists in terms of their economic models.
No.
He's drawing an analogy about how power and knowledge are hoarded. It all comes down to a lack of transparency.
That's the core of his argument. Nash points out that both the Bolshevik framework and the modern Keynesian framework claim to operate for the high, noble objectives of the general public's welfare.
Right.
But both fundamentally rely on a paternalistic belief that a small group of elite managers should pull the levers behind a curtain. The Keynesians implicitly argue that the underlying math of monetary policy is simply too complex or perhaps too dangerous for the everyday customer of the currency to fully understand.
I kept thinking of a building superintendent while reading this section of Nash's lecture.
Oh, how so?
Well, imagine a superintendent who is secretly shaving a millimeter off the markings of the crew's tape measures every single night.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The carpenters come in, measure their wood, and think they're incredibly productive because they are building more units with less material. The construction numbers look fantastic on paper for the month, but the superintendent never tells the carpenters he's secretly altering the fundamental unit of measurement.
That's a great way to picture it.
So this raises an important question. In Nash's framework, is the public being intentionally subjected to a hidden tax?
Yes. That lack of transparency makes it incredibly easy for governments to quietly print money to fund massive operations without ever having to face the political backlash of explicitly raising income taxes.
Oh.
The inflation stretches the tape measure, quietly draining the purchasing power from the citizens' savings. It is a hidden, unlegislated tax.
But Nash doesn't seem to think the public will tolerate the hidden tax forever.
No, he is actually quite optimistic about political evolution. Just as citizens in great democracies have historically demanded transparency and voting rights regarding how their physical taxes are spent, Nash believes they will eventually wake up to the math of the time axis.
They'll see the rust.
Exactly. They will demand to understand the monetary policies eroding their hard-earned savings, rejecting the idea that central bank mechanics are simply beyond their comprehension.
So, if manipulative central banking, hidden taxes, and intentional inflation are the disease, what is Nash's cure.
Right.
We've stripped away the emotional baggage, we've broken down the game theory of utility, and we've walked through his critique of the managers. Now we need the roadmap. How do we build a currency that doesn't rust?
Nash starts with the absolute theoretical peak, what he calls ideal money.
Okay.
Rationally and scientifically, he argues that money should function purely as an unwavering standard of measurement. It should be as globally reliable as a watt for measuring power, an hour for measuring time, or a degree for measuring temperature.
A tape measure made of solid steel.
Exactly the concept. He suggests this could theoretically be achieved by mathematically linking a currency to a broad, carefully calculated index of the prices of internationally traded commodities.
Like gold standard stuff.
Well, he specifically notes that tying it to just gold or silver is outdated. It needs to be a robust basket of global commodities. A currency managed this way would be intrinsically immune to what he famously terms inflationary decadence.
But Nash is a pragmatist. He admits in the lecture that implementing a perfectly ideal money system from scratch is politically nearly impossible.
Yeah, totally.
Trying to get competing global superpowers to completely relinquish the political power of their money printers and agree on a single, mathematically fixed commodity index, it's a pipe dream.
Which is why his ultimate solution pivots to the concept of asymptotically ideal money.
For anyone whose geometry is a little rusty, an asymptote is a curve on a graph that gets closer and closer to a straight line, a target, without ever quite touching it perfectly.
Right.
It's about a continuous approach toward an ideal state over time, rather than demanding perfection on day one.
And the real-world inspiration for this asymptotic approach came from a specific trend in central banking that actually originated in New Zealand.
Oh, right, inflation targeting.
Yes, inflation targeting.
This was my absolute favorite insight from the entire text. Nash looks at central banks standing up at podiums and formally announcing, "We are targeting an inflation rate of 2%. And Nash doesn't see this as a policy victory. He views it as a massive accidental confession.
It is the ultimate confession. By publicly stating they have the mechanisms to hit a specific inflation target, central bankers are admitting that they actually do control the supply and quality of the money.
Yeah.
Nash likens it to a syndicate controlling the exact number of prints that can be made of a rare piece of fine art.
It's like a magician accidentally revealing the rabbit was in his sleeve the whole time.
Exactly.
If you publicly admit you have the precise levers to target a 2% stretch in the tape measure, then logically you have the power to target 0.
Right.
The true ideal target for a pure unit of measurement should obviously be 0 inflation. Nash even points out that New Zealand wasn't navigating some catastrophic poverty crisis that forced them to depreciate their dollar. They were simply operating in an intellectual climate where that Keynesian short-term expediency thinking was deeply entrenched.
So the critical challenge becomes, how do we force these central banks to actually aim the asymptote at 0?
Right.
If we can't rely on a utopian global treaty, what is the mechanism of enforcement? Nash says the mechanism is brutal, transparent competition.
Currencies actively competing for customers.
Mm-hmm.
How does that practically play out on the global stage?
It means we have entered an era where major currencies must fight for the trust of international users and capital. Nash points out that highly sophisticated financial enterprises, like major international insurance conglomerates, aren't stupid.
They are not.
They already actively migrate their operations and capital reserves to national jurisdictions, where the currency is of a historically higher quality. Places like Switzerland, capital naturally flees a rusting pipe.
And Nash highlights the introduction of the euro as a massive historical catalyst for this competition. Let's look at the mechanics of that. The euro replaced several national currencies, most notably the Italian lira, which had a notoriously terrible history of rapid inflation.
Right.
For an everyday Italian citizen or business owner trying to save or sign contracts in lira was incredibly friction-heavy because the value was always bleeding away. Suddenly, they're operating in euros.
It was a huge shift.
Yeah. And on the global stage, you now have these major heavyweight currencies: the euro, the US dollar, the Japanese yen, the British pound, the Swiss francs, the Swedish kroner, all standing in direct competitive relations with one another.
And because these competing managers are all now utilizing inflation targeting, they are forced to regularly publish their domestic cost of living indices. This is a game changer for transparency. It means the global public, along with ruthless international currency markets, can easily and realistically compare the actual real-time degradation of these currencies via public exchange rates.
You put all the different brands of tape measures next to each other on a brightly lit shelf.
Yes.
The public can clearly see which central banks are stretching their rulers and which ones are holding the line. Nash argues this sheer visibility creates immense, unavoidable public pressure.
When the public who relies on this medium of exchange as a fundamental life utility develops a highly critical, educated opinion of lower quality inflationary currencies,
Wow.
they will simply demand better. They will demand that their managers stop delivering the inflationary decadence that really defined the 20th century.
Nash gives some fantastic real-world examples of this public choice mechanism in action. He talks about how the citizens of Sweden actually voted in a national referendum against joining the Eurobloc.
Oh, yeah, that's a perfect example.
They actively looked at the options and decided their own Swedish kroner's quality and management were more assured outside the Eurozone.
Mm-hmm.
And he mentions the UK voters historically delaying the adoption of the euro, carrying the deep institutional memory of the British pound being the original currency of the gold standard, pegged way back in 1717 by Isaac Newton when he was master of the mint. That historical legacy gave them a baseline expectation of currency quality.
It just demonstrates that when citizens are given a transparent side-by-side choice, they genuinely care about the underlying mathematical quality of their money.
So what does this all mean? I want to challenge this with a scenario that happens quite often.
Okay, go for it.
If international competition is the forcing function, what about smaller emerging economies? If a smaller country decides to just artificially peg its currency to a heavyweight, like Argentina famously pegging its peso to the US dollar years ago, or Panama officially linking to the dollar, doesn't that instantly solve their time axis problem? You just bolt your flimsy rubber tape measure to a giant steel one. Problem solved.
Right. If we connect this to the bigger picture, Nash warns that artificial pegs are actually incredibly brittle and risky.
Hmm.
The international markets naturally distrust the reliability of a local fiat stabilization trick like that.
Why is that?
Because an artificial peg doesn't fundamentally fix the underlying economic output or political discipline of the smaller country. They are simply borrowing credibility they haven't earned.
Right, the rust is still in their local pipes. They've just painted over it.
Precisely. And it actually creates a parasitic risk. Nash argues that if a coalition of non-European countries unilaterally decided to just peg their domestic money to the euro without actually joining the rigorous cooperative regulations and economic standards of the Eurozone, it would likely introduce massive instability to the euro itself.
Wow, so it works both ways.
Yeah. The true asymptotically ideal state isn't achieved by artificial, easily broken government decrees. It is achieved organically through continuous, transparent international competition where users and capital naturally migrate away from bad managers and toward the highest quality zero-analogy currencies.
Man, the ground we've covered today completely shifts how you view the cash in your pocket.
It really does.
Let's trace the arc of Nash's argument one more time. We started by shedding the moral and religious baggage we associate with money, recognizing it not as a source of sin, but as a vital, neutral technology born out of the necessity of specialized labor outside the Garden of Eden. We dug into the game theory, see exactly how money acts as the ultimate universal adapter, converting blocked, non-transferable scenarios into smooth, cooperative exchanges, but only if the time axis isn't destroyed by the rust of inflation.
We then explored Nash's fiercely analytical critique of Keynesian manipulation. We unpacked how a deliberate lack of transparency allows governments to extract a hidden tax from their citizens, driven by elite managers who believe the public shouldn't worry their heads about the mechanics of their own savings.
And finally, we arrived at his brilliant, optimistic vision for the future. The realization that by publicly confessing their ability to target inflation, central banks have unwittingly opened the door to their own accountability.
Yeah.
We are moving toward a world where the dollar, the euro, the yen, and the franc are forced to fight a transparent battle for our trust, naturally driving global monetary policy toward an asymptotically ideal standard of absolute zero inflation.
It is a profound structural shift in how we understand the balance of power in global finance.
It truly is. And I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over, building directly on the mechanics of Nash's lecture. We are so deeply conditioned to believe that our ultimate power as citizens, to shape society and hold governments accountable, lies entirely at the ballot box.
That's what we're taught, yeah.
We cast a vote, hoping the politicians will manage the economy well. But if Nash is right, if the era of absolute transparency means currencies are now being forced into brutal global competition for our trust and our capital, what if your ultimate power to keep governments in check isn't just your vote?
Hmm.
What if your absolute greatest leverage over this state is actually your everyday quiet choice of which currency you decide to store your life's labor in?
When capital can flee bad management at the click of a button, the managers are forced to listen.
Next time you pull a bill from your wallet or check your bank balance on your phone, ask yourself, is this a reliable steel ruler or is the rubber secretly stretching? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the brilliant mind of John F. Nash Jr. Keep questioning the everyday systems around you. We will catch you next time.